Yes, welcome back. You're still watching Citizen Extra with me, Fred Indimuli, the Friday edition. It's not Power Breakfast. I have to apologize for that. It is Citizen Extra, the Friday edition. We continue crunching the numbers here, and it's very interesting even during the break, the kind of discussions we're having in studio, because numbers do get interesting. I know some people say numbers are very boring, but these ones look very interesting. A bump in numbers by a margin of 5.2 million votes. These are generally new, younger voters. How do you expect the trend to go this time round? Remember the difference last time between the two major presidential candidates, so that's Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta, was about 800,000. Uhuru Kenyatta got a total of 6,173,000 votes. That's 50.5%, and that guaranteed him a win in round one. Raila Odinga got 43.7%. That's 5.34 million votes, a difference of about 800,000. Remember, now we have 5.2 million new voters. How will these numbers come into play in the elections in the next 38 days? That's what we continue looking at. We're just looking at Bungoma and what will happen there. In 2013, 185,000 people voted for Raila Odinga, 107,000 voted for Musalia Mudavadi, 42,000 voted for Uhuru Kenyatta. Let's switch and go to an area perceived as a Jubilee stronghold, where we've seen NASA trying to make inroads, and that's Meru and Tharaka Nithi. Back in 2013, Meru County had 487,000 voters. 384,000 voted for Uhuru Kenyatta, 32,000 voted for Raila Odinga. Meru could have adjusted quite a bit. Just a moment. Yes, Meru now has 702,000 voters. That's a bump of about 215,000 new voters. That's huge. Do you think that Raila Odinga's forays into Meru recently could probably guarantee him the possibility of hiving off a good percentage of these? David Osiani?
Well, before we even get to Meru, let me touch on Bungoma a little bit, because that's a habit. I think Bungoma may be the only county where, in Western, where probably Jubilee would get 10-15%, because they've been able to give them a little freebies. The chair of Jubilee Party, you know, is from there, Ken Lusaka, who's the governor. That may give them a few votes. And then they have Eugene Wamalwa, who in 2013 was a force to reckon with in the Bungoma politics, but seems to have lost his luster. And so maybe they'll get a 10% vote. It will still be a 90% for Raila Odinga. But on to Meru, there has been, you know, the disenfranchisement, the disappointment Meru people have had with the current regime is that the president has not been able to sort out their backbone, which is the Miraa issue. I bet that's what endears Raila Odinga to them. And so whereas it was a stronghold, I bet Raila has really tried to push it to become a battleground. I'm not too sure it has crossed over.
Do you see the 7% for Raila moving to maybe a 10% in Meru?
Maybe 20.
20?
I mean, it may sound too high, but I bet it may even pass the 20% mark. Mm-hmm. The disappointment in Meru and the way people have received him there, unlike Nyeri, where, you know, when you're unwanted, you know you're unwanted. When someone is loved, he is loved. It may move from the 7% in 2013, particularly now with the measures put in place to avoid the voter manipulation, to probably 20-25%.
Bonasam Kamau, anything about between 7 and 10% could be a good 70,000 votes. If Raila Odinga gets about 70,000 votes from Meru, that's huge, don't you think?
Absolutely, and I wouldn't say that it is the Miraa issue that the Meru region has to complain about, because Uhuru has tried I think injected close to 2 billion towards reviving the cash crop in that particular area. But if you remember 2013, I think there are 2 ODM MPs who were elected from the Meru region. The Meru people have a mind of their own. They are independent. And there are certain politics within the larger, you know, the larger Mount Kenya politics, where occasionally they feel that even if we are normally counted together, I think we tend to support and benefit our brothers from, you know, the central region. And I think those are the politics, you know, that is what is at play here. What NASA has seen is that they feel there is a soft spot here that if they keep hammering hard, they could push their 7%. I would give them a maximum of, you know, 10-11%. It won't go beyond that. It will not be so significant. But what I said, in a game of numbers, if you could weaken your opponent's strongholds and gain something, the same way Jubilee is trying to target Western and the Lower Eastern region and the rural coast counties. In that sense, then, even a 2% or a 3% increase, that is quite significant.
Yeah, Uhuru Kenyatta, in the case of Bungoma, got a 12% in the last elections. That's huge. If he can maintain that in Bungoma, or probably go up to about 20%, that's
he's targeting 25%.
25% in Bungoma would be huge, because the kind of numbers we're talking about in Bungoma, 560,000, 25% would be about 100, almost 140,000. That's huge. Any of this, if at all you can hive off something more than 100,000 from an area perceived to be a stronghold of your opponent, that's huge, Bwana John Kagushia. Do you think NASA and Raila Odinga could be able to hive off anything close to that in Meru or Tharaka Nithi, for that matter?
Let me just go back a little bit to Western Kenya and say that Western Kenya naturally or traditionally has always had a very, very low turnout of voters. And last time the voter turnout was a little bit higher because they had a presidential candidate in the name of Musalia Mudavadi, and you can see there was a bit of enthusiasm in Western Kenya. This time round, they failed to clinch the first position. They failed to clinch the second position. They failed, I think, to, I don't know whether Musalia is number 3 or number 4 in the equation. But I think number 5 is from Bomet. So with that, it will lower the enthusiasm in that area, and that's why you see the activity in Western Kenya has been a little bit more vibrant for all the other political parties, because then they do not have a presidential candidate, and they do not now seem to have a serious stake in
Western Kenya. Which areas of Western Kenya specifically? Because as I mentioned earlier, Bungoma, Busia, Kakamega do not probably vote in the same way
because of Mudavadi's candidacy in Western Kenya last time. Jubilee or Uhuru and Ruto did not venture out in that area in the last election. But if you look at how they have ventured out in Western Kenya this time round, they have gone there and they have been able to get and convert very many elected leaders in different constituencies to fight their battle on the ground. And remember, the way you mobilize and the way you're able to get support and get people to side with you is by targeting their leaders. And then you sponsor their leaders to ensure that they are mobilizing for you and repeat your message as many times as possible. If you go to a place like Bungoma, as you have raised, I have gone there in the last 1 month. And one of the things I discovered is that they have a candidate for every constituency. There is a candidate who is in Jubilee, there is a candidate who is in ODM, ANC, Ford Kenya, and you have also, of course, independent candidates. So, and you can see the campaigns which are being done there for a Jubilee candidate are the same which are being done for a ODM candidate, even for Ford Kenya and ANC. And that tells you that there has been traction towards that area.
Do you think that will affect the presidential vote with so many different candidates? How will that be? Because some of these parties are affiliated to NASA.
It will definitely affect, and it will affect because first Jubilee will be able to, because of that division, they will be able to benefit from some of those constituencies where they have strong candidates, and then if you look at the gubernatorial race again also in Bungoma, you'll of course find that they have 3 other candidates. They have Ford Kenya, they have ODM, and then they have Jubilee, and the Jubilee candidate there is also the sitting governor. And the other day you saw Wetangula going there, and he was not allowed to address a public rally in actually his county, Bungoma, where they were all shouting Jubilee. And that tells you that there is a bit of traction towards Jubilee from especially Bungoma. And Bungoma is the one that gave Jubilee most votes at 42,000 last time. And this time round, they might actually go to up to 100,000 votes. Now, going to Meru, unlike what Jubilee has done in Western Kenya, going through the leaders, and Jubilee is doing the same thing in Coast, and they're doing the same thing also in Ukambani or Lower Eastern region. ODM has not found it necessary, I don't know for what reason, to go through the leaders, to get leaders whom they can use and they can go with, especially the elected leaders or leaders who are going for positions. You don't find them using the leaders to go and get support. So when they go there, they are received very nicely. Of course, Raila Odinga would be received in any county very, very warmly. If he comes to Nyeri County, and indeed he has come to Nyeri County, he has gone to Nyeri County twice this year. You remember during the burial of the Governor Gachagua, and he was received very, very warmly. When he went back again there for Madaraka Day, again there was jubilation for people to see Raila. But that again does not translate into votes. So the issue of a leader being received warmly is not good enough. What Raila ought to have done in Meru is to use good leaders or to convert leaders. But then you realize the two ODM MPs who are elected in that region, as soon as they landed in parliament, they changed their song and went back to the Jubilee side. Again, that is not very good for NASA party. So maybe they need to relook at the approach, because once Raila leaves Meru region, again he does not leave good people who are going to take care of his voters. Remember, when they were in Meru, Wetangula, instead of supporting the Wiper candidate who is gunning for the gubernatorial position there, Euman, he went to support Munya, and Munya is supporting Uhuru. So you see that kind of miscalculation. You wonder why they would be making that kind of a mistake.
You don't see them improving on the 7% that Raila Odinga got?
They would have done so if they went through elected leaders, if they were able to get leaders in those areas who were even gunning for positions, people who were able to mobilize for them, but not people who only want to have, maybe to get power in NASA government once it goes to, if they get power, but without having to do mobilization, real mobilization.
Oceana is keen to respond to
that. One, it is meaningless to identify campaigners in different parts of the country that are not strongholds for Uhuru Kenyatta if the appointment of those campaigners will make them be treated like people with leprosy. All right, everywhere some of these characters have gone to, my estimation, and you have seen, is that they have been rejected. They have been treated badly. My good friend Babu Namwamba was actually booed in his own county in the presence of Uhuru Kenyatta. Major Waluke has had the same. The MPs in Eastern, like Joe Mutambu and the rest, have been treated very badly because they have departed from the obvious resuscitation of the nation, which seems to lie with NASA at this point. And therefore, appointing these as the campaigners is not the only strategy towards getting the vote. There are people who are not politicians, but who have a lot of influence and who wield a lot of power among the electorate. They must not be elected politicians. That said, Kagusha has pointed out to an imaginary instance that he believes Wetangula was heckled in Bungoma. And I think he must be watching something different from us, which I didn't see, unless Freddie, you must have seen it. You will be the judge here. That has not happened in my estimation. I haven't seen that. And he also points out to a point where Wetangula supposedly went to support Governor Munya in Meru and not supporting a women rep, as though those two are not mutually exclusive. And so there is no candidate that is running, that is NASA's candidate for governor in Meru. All right? And so that Governor Wetangula may have, I am not even sure he did it, may have supported Governor Munya, and yet there is a woman. Doesn't mean that he did not support the women. Be that as it may, I still assure you, to inject 2 billion into an economy among the Meru, as Dr. Sam Kamau says it is meaningless to inject 2 billion shillings towards a cash crop without creating a market for that cash crop. It is the same fallacy that has been with the Mumias, where they need more than 10 billion, you inject 1 billion. Where do they get the 9 billion from? You go to pan paper mills that need an absolute overhaul in terms of its mechanization and everything else to get the top of the edge, easy to manage, less costly production unit. And you pump in 500 or 300 million, I don't remember what it was, when the need there is massive. So this is the reason why I say that in Meru, the NASA brigade may end up with a slight bigger vote, just as it will in Bomet, near obviously. That was a stronghold for Jubilee, but now that has turned to be a battleground for Jubilee and NASA.
Okay, we're just about to wrap up this particular discussion in the next few minutes, so I'll give you guys an opportunity to give your final words. Generally speaking, 5.2 million new voters spread across the country. Which and what are the two Jubilee and NASA? What are they doing wrong in as far as hunting for these new votes, or rather, what are they doing right? Let's start with you, Bwana Sam Kamau.
I would say I can't say they are doing wrong, because in terms of strategy they know what they need to do. And I think when you look at the bigger picture, that is the strongholds. For the strongholds, they need to make sure, and that is why you have seen Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto, they have spent a bit of time in their strongholds to make sure there is good turnout in their strongholds. In the battlegrounds is to make sure that a majority of those people in the battleground counties vote for Jubilee or for NASA, depending on who is targeting them. And for the strongholds of your opponent, you just need to make sure two things: either there is deflated turnout in support of your opponent, or there is an increased advantage to your side if it is the stronghold of your opponent. And the reason I'm saying for Jubilee, they are targeting maximum turnout in their counties, but they are also targeting the strongholds of CORD or NASA, specifically in Western, Lower Eastern, and the rural coast counties, to make sure that they increase, have a decent performance, maybe targeting up to 25% in a place like some counties in Western. In Lower Eastern, I think targeting up to 30%, and in the rural coast counties, up to around 30% in a place like Lamu, Kwale, Tana River, and Taita Taveta. And I think that will be the strategy going forward. The other thing is having a message that is specific and that appeals to the different regions based on their needs and their grievances, which they have been expressing openly. The last thing I would like to say on that is that I say this is a referendum on Jubilee and their performance. They are promising, they are talking about Tano Tena. The issue is whether those people who in 2013 did not support Jubilee will have a reason for supporting them now, and those who supported them in 2013, whether they have a reason to continue supporting them. And for NASA is to show that we are actually the alternative, and if you give us a chance, given that they have also been in power in the past but not at the president level, whether they will be able to convince a good number of former Jubilee supporters to support them in 2017 and convince their supporters to remain intact. And I think all those factors, none is guaranteed.
But surely this 5.2 million new voters, because they did not get to vote back in 2013, we assume that quite a number of them are young voters, that probably they're getting to vote for the very first time. Don't you think that just because it's a youthful vote, that could also tilt the scales in one way or the other? Because do we expect them to vote the same way, the same trend that these older voters have been following through and through? John Kagusha.
Yeah, I think the trends will generally be the same across the country.
Despite having a younger voter turnout?
Well, I think so. That is my prediction. Although again, you would also ask, will the younger voters want to vote for younger leaders or the older leaders? So you will definitely wonder whether they will be more attracted towards the older leaders or to the younger leaders. But generally, I believe they will be voting just the same way Kenya has been voting, because we have had the phenomenon of young voters, all along. But I don't think in Kenya we have had a situation where the generations or even the age groups are determining who becomes the president or who takes what position, especially at the national level. At the lower levels, that happens a lot, especially at the parliamentary and gubernatorial. That happens a lot. But at the national level, normally it goes regionally. And so, of course, you will not expect, for example, people to be so glued on the issues of manifestos. You will not expect, again, and it's unfortunate, you will not expect people again to be so keen on even performance, as Osiani puts it. Unfortunately, people will be more on the regional voting patterns than they would be on all those other areas. And probably that's where our politics will need to change as we move forward, because again, it makes us also feel a bit helpless that even if you went and performed so well, or you did not even perform, then people will be more inclined towards you, depending on where you come from and where they come from. And that is why basically you are seeing, Fred, after the launch of the manifestos, you have not had anyone dwelling on those manifestos anymore.
It only lasted 2 hours, and then we moved on to other things.
Indeed, you see one had 76 pages, one had 17 pages, and
no, it was 60 pages, 60 pages and 76 pages.
But again, Fred, as I want to do a fact check on Meru. I need to check for us. I think we have a Wiper candidate who is a NASA candidate going for gubernatorial position in Meru. Again, I think you need to do a fact check that for Osiani again.
David Osiani, final words as we wrap up this conversation.
The tragedy of our country is its ethnocentricized kind of politics. Be that as it may, the 2017 elections will see a slight, not extremely huge difference. There will be a slight difference to that because of weighing the current government, the current regime on a scale. So there will be some voters who, regardless of their ethnic basis, especially the middle class, who are not the majority, they are a limited number, but they are quite a number, they would want to say, you know what, here it is, this regime has done this, under this regime we have had several of these maladies, and so we may want to try something else. That's for the voters to see. But the election is going to entirely be hinged on the voter turnout. If NASA bases can perform as fairly good as they did with the registration, because again, we have to know that we have to merge the voter registration and voter turnout. They've usually gone hand in hand. When there is low registration, there is low turnout at the end. When there is slightly higher registration, as we've seen, there is definitely going to be a slightly higher turnout. And I think the places like Western Region and Bomet will really come key because of the enthusiasm thereabout. Be that as it may, I really wish that our voters will go to that ballot box and take that ballot paper and look at what they want. Do they want continuity? Do they want transfer? It's going to be their choice. And I want to urge the campaigners, both NASA and Jubilee, to articulate their manifestos to the people, because most of them may not read. For me, I would hope that Jubilee would tell them, this is what we promised. Of course, they have delivered less than 20% of what they promised, which is tragic. However, I expect CORD to then NASA to then take up that opportunity, explaining to the voters, this is what we promise. Okay. This is how we will deliver it. And it is not ideal, it is real, that with us you will do this. That way we will have an election. But at the end of the day, I want us to hope that we will have a peaceful nation, because when it's all said and done, this is our country.
Well said, David Osiani. Thank you so much, David Osiani, John Kagushia, and Dr. Sam Kamau, who are helping us analyze the voter numbers. 19,611,000 to be exact. That's the new voters roll against 14 million last time around, a difference of about 5.2 million voters this time around. Even as we go on a break, I'd like to thank my analysts for this hour. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And as we go on a break, the Law Society of Kenya Kisumu chapter is currently holding a protest march in Kisumu. They're currently addressing the press with regard to extrajudicial killings. Let's listen in.
The Inspector General of Police has failed to take any steps to end extrajudicial executions in Kenya. Instead, there seems to be a silent policy to set up extrajudicial executions. We note with grief the continuation of perpetuated violence and brutal killing of suspects by the police. Hardly a day goes by without a citizen being killed at the hands of the police. That some of these executions take place in broad daylight in public confirms that the police service carries out these executions killings with near total impunity. We are not talking about reasonable, necessary and proportionate use of force to apply the law. We are not talking about situations where the public or the life of the police is in danger. No, we are talking about excessive use of police force by the execution of suspects who have surrendered. As a result, we are here today to remind Inspector General of Police that the National Police Service envisaged by the Constitution is not trigger-happy, force we witness today. The Constitution itself requires the National Police Service to comply with constitutional standards of human rights and fundamental freedoms. It is also the obligation of the Inspector General and the National Police Service to observe, respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights and fundamental freedoms in the Bill of Rights, including the right to life, dignity, and fair trial. To the contrary, this culture of extrajudicial execution directly undermines an absolute right, the right to a fair trial. It deprives suspects of the right to a presumption of innocence and denies them the benefit of a fair trial. It silences them forever and deprives them of the equal benefit of the law. We are also concerned by the failure to investigate extrajudicial killings. We remind the Inspector General that extrajudicial killings must be investigated, whether or not there is a formal complaint. We are satisfied beyond all doubt that the continuation of the culture of extrajudicial execution in Kenya could mean that the Inspector General is fit for removal from office under Article 245 of the Constitution. We are studying the situation with a view to petitioning for the removal of the Inspector General for incompetence and violation of the Constitution. To stem the upsurge of extrajudicial killings in compliance with the execution and the law, we demand that the Inspector General immediately adopts the following measures. 1. Ensure prompt, thorough, independent, and impartial investigations are automatically initiated into any extrajudicial killing by a Kenya Police Service. Investigations into extrajudicial killings must be undertaken whether or not there is a formal complaint. The investigating body and the investigators must not be those suspected of being involved in crime. The investigations must comply with the standards under international law on investigations of extrajudicial executions, extending to A. autopsy, B. protection of witnesses and complainants, C. information to families, and D. investigation report. These investigations must be commenced promptly and without delay as soon as a complaint of an alleged judicial execution has been made, or even in the absence of such a complaint as soon as the Inspector General is made aware of the same. The investigations must have the power necessary to carry out the investigations, obtain all necessary information, and have access to places and documents subject to legal privileges or restrictions. And 6. Following the finding of an extrajudicial execution, the following actions must ensue. A. Prosecution. Remedy. B. Remedy. C. Guarantees of non-recurrence. In the meantime, we demand for the following information from the General of Police within the next 14 days. 1. The number of extrajudicial killings by members of the National Police Service in the last 1 year. 2. The names, designations, and ranks of the police officers suspected to have involved in those executions. 3. The steps taken to investigate the extrajudicial execution. 4. Steps taken to prosecute the suspects and to compensate the families of those involved and to guarantee the public of non-recurrence. And 5. Any policies developed by the Inspector General to deter extrajudicial executions. We are exploring the possibility of filing a class action against the Attorney General, the Inspector General, and the National Police Service for compensation of the families of victims of extrajudicial executions. We similarly urge all members countrywide to take up and prosecute petitions for the compensation of families of the victims of extrajudicial killings. We must and we can bring extrajudicial killings in Kenya to an end. We owe it to ourselves and we owe it to Willie Kimani, who died fighting to end excessive use of police force by the Kenya Police Service. Isaac E.N. Okero, President, Law Society of Kenya. Now we shall have a summary.
The Law Society of Kenya Kisumu chapter there, the chairperson addressing a media briefing with regard to extrajudicial killings. Let's now switch to Uasin Gishu County, where I do understand a number of bishops are currently addressing a media briefing as well on issues to do with peaceful campaigns. Let's listen in as well.
Sports areas, but we are still as a church praying that there be peace, even those areas they think they are hotspots areas, that during and after the general elections there shall be total peace. And I am not aware of any church that is really actively promoting and allowing campaign to take place within church premises. I'm not aware unless you tell me. Not as far as we are concerned here. So, and the position of the church is very clear. We are our moral obligation for the nation, for the society, and even for all of us here. At no time should we be engaging in active politics. Thank you very much. The last one, okay.
We have an issue with the nurses' strike and hunger in some parts of Ghana, West Side. But politics is going on, nobody is talking about that. I don't know, as church leaders, what can you say about that? How is our moral in terms of seeing our people, those who are suffering and they are not even making money?
I think, for your information, we know there is anger across Kenya, especially the northern Kenya and some parts to the coast. But the respective departments of the government and the county government are doing what they can to provide food to the people. And we are eyewitnesses. Recently in West Pokot, as late as last week, there was food distribution in some of those areas. And so it is ongoing. And we thank God. It is not long. Food is growing and it is coming. In Western Kenya, people are beginning to harvest. I was sharing with my brother from Tesoland. Food is getting ready. We are soon going to kick off this hunger and we'll have food on the table. May God bless us. Thank you very much. Well,